Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Here's a quote before I introduce our episode. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundations of the world. Matthew 13:35. Today's episode, I'm calling wood chopping. Abraham Lincoln said, "If I have 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 4 hours sharpening my axe." We have our annual TAG, or the American Gift Conference, in 2025, June 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's a spectacular time of the year for culture, demonstrating why it matters, investing into relationships, representing the vision and action, living out our core values of an amazing company that impacts tens of thousands of people throughout the United States as it relates to home ownership, which in this podcast, I'm preparing questions for a conversation with one of the figureheads at the American Gift Conference. There's multiple pundits or archetypal heroes, as Dr. Peterson may put it, that are adding value to the American Gift Conference. And I thought, what better way to prepare for my interview with one of these figureheads? There are unbelievable people coming from Janine Driver, one of the top experts in body language in the world, who's a friend of the Culture Matters podcast and very quickly becoming a regular on the show. Go check Janine out. We have the one and only Jesse Itzler, co-founder of Marquee Jets, that was acquired by NetJets many years ago, that was backed by Berkshire Hathaway, that we love. That brand, that culture on the Culture Matters podcast, and so many other amazing things that Jesse's done and continues to do in his career as a community builder, an inspirer of people, a mentor. I can personally attest to a sauna retreat where I got to jump in a cold plunge for the first time. And that'll be a show for another day, and how awesome that was, and to spend time with him. We've got Kevin Hart, who, I mean, you don't really even need to introduce that guy. He's hilarious movie star, comedian. Dave Portnoy, founder of Barstool and pizza extraordinaire, hilarious entrepreneur, wealth of knowledge, but the and of course the leaders of EPM putting on the American Gift Conference, from the founder Eddie Perez to Phil Mancuso, Kevin Delory in spirit with us, love, honor, respect. If you listen to the Culture Matters podcast, you know these figures from the Culture Matters podcast, Kenny Phillips, and so many more amazing people that have yet to be on the show from the EPM culture that will be on the show in 25, 26, 27, and beyond. But the reason I'm doing this episode is for one of the figures yet to be named at the American Gift Conference, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who's been a huge influence over this podcast through influencing my work as a culture advisor over almost a decade going on, studying his textbook Maps of Meaning. And of course, if you listen to the Culture Matters podcast, you may have heard some of the episodes of my learnings of the Beyond Order series, rules 1 through 12, intro and outro, and so much more. But in that series, I talked about having the opportunity to actually interview and spend time, have a conversation with, and even is it an interview, is it a conversation? Spend time with this great teacher, an international figure in thought, personal responsibility, the idea of standing up straight with your shoulders back, cleaning your room, trying to make at least one room in your home as beautiful as possible, and so on. The American Gift Conference, I'm having this conversation, and in preparation for that, if you have 6 hours to chop down a tree, spend 4 hours sharpening my blade. So my thought was not only to write up questions based on various topics that I would think make sense for the actual culture of the American Gift Conference, which is purpose is to bring together all parties that make the American gift happen. What is the American gift? It's the concept that if you're in America, it's not a dream. It's a dream for those outside of America that don't have the opportunity to pursue that American dream, but actually are already here. It's a gift, and we have to appreciate it. We could lose it if we don't fight for it. We need to appreciate it and get the most out of America, our culture, the world, our lives to make the world a better place through making our lives a better place. So, what better figure of many of the greats listed than Dr. Jordan B. Peterson to talk about what is the American gift, or why is housing meaningful, and an handful of other topics like what is a broker, what is an account executive, how do you maintain and develop long lasting partnerships, what does it, what is aiming up, why is it important, how do you actually do it? So I broke down these different topics, and I thought there's a lot of questions that I wrote down. There was only just under an hour to actually have this interview, this conversation. So my original 59 questions were kind of maybe too much, or for a different event on a different day, or maybe having Dr. Peterson on the Culture Matters podcast to explore some of those questions. So I came up with more specific questions to the American Gift Conference, the culture that we're creating here, that we desire to not only uh, make better, but maintain and improve, so it doesn't get disrupted unwittingly, and then chaos returns. So I thought, oh, okay, in room for preparation, I'm recording this on June 3rd, around 12:45 p.m. Eastern Standard. The interview is not until Thursday, um, about 34 hours from now ish. Um, but I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to read the questions, and I'm going to answer them in how I think that Dr. Peterson would answer them. And that's this is doing for me in a sense of preparation, is actually helping me internalize the question. Although I've written the question down, I don't like to read off of teleprompters. I don't like to, as opposed to just reading the questions, I'm more interested in taking notes so I can listen better and not interrupt and ask better questions. Because it's not just the question that we ask. If we're learning anything from the Culture Matters podcast, is when you listen to me interviewing guests, it's not just the question I ask them. That has relevance in the sense of preparation that's been done prior to. It's almost like a live recording of watching me do a culture map when I'm preparing for all these guests. If you ever wondered, how do I prepare to actually interview guests at the highest level so that they have a conversation with me as a host that they otherwise normally wouldn't? Because one of the diminishing returns of being in a position of guest on show is we all have a story, and these stories that we are consistently sharing and going through as a consequence of being a subject matter expert on A, B, C, or D. But it's the one of the responsibilities of the host to go deeper, and part of how that's done is to prepare and to openly endeavor to follow one's or pursue one's passion of increase, curiosity. And so the more that one prepares in the position of host, it's not to have I look at it as the preparation is so then I could set away all of the questions and fully be present, and I've internalized kind of the map or the framework because I don't even know where the conversation is going to go. That's going to be revealed in the curiosities that arise as a consequence of the answers from my counterpart after I ask the question. But there is preparation that goes before that to do the best job possible. And in this sense, if I wrote these questions, if they're thinking through what would be relevant to the audience based on the context of the event, based on the content of the people that are participating, education, experience, background, and the wisdom that would be necessary to help them at the highest likelihood. If I ask these questions here and then actually answer them, thinking like how Dr. Peterson would answer them based on my studies of his work, then I'm going to be like uber prepared. And it would kind of be fun and give you behind the scenes look at how the Culture Matters podcast has blossomed into something that's has such a loyal fan base of people that like listening to the interviews of people that come on the show. So the part one was the American gift. Why is housing meaningful? Why is it actually meaningful? Question one, how does homeownership impact our culture? And why is this profession meaningful based on your study of culture, society, and governance? How does homeownership impact our culture? And why is this profession meaningful based on your study of culture, society, and governments? We want our audience to think more deeply than they otherwise may normally around what they do and why it matters. The right to have property, the right to have property is something that past societies have and continue to, even to this day. Of course, there's many ways to govern a society, just like there's many ways for a company to be managed. And how a company is managed increases or decreases the satisfaction of its employees, just like how a country would be governed would increase or decrease the satisfaction of how the citizens uh, feel about their lives or what their potential feeling could be about their lives. And in the United States of America, the opportunity is the right to have the right to have property, the right for each of us to actually say this is mine and I can build my life on top of it. One of the things that's discussed in Dr. Peterson's work, like the checklist, for example, in Rule 1 in Beyond Order, which is do not carelessly denigrate social institutions and creative achievements, is how important from a personal standpoint, uh, and social, like, well, personal, family and friendships and education and career, and on the social, marriage or yeah, marriage and community. Home ownership actually implies family, it implies career, because to pay for the home, one has to actually have an ability to pay. So that implies career, the which implies education, knowing something, being competent at something. That ties into actually what motivates human beings or what increases positive emotion, which is having a vision, having an aim, having a goal, having hope, like working towards the future, which then actually creates a call to self-sacrifice. So how how does homeownership impact our culture, and why is the profession meaningful? The people that actually help people get into homes are participating in those people's ability to actually mature as individuals and move up, aim up, move up in their social standing, move up in their economic standing, provide resources and opportunities to their children that they may not have had. The role of home ownership in a society like the United States of America is a meaning creating machine. part of how we get meaning, according to Peterson, is to take on responsibility. And part of having a home is a different degree of responsibility than renting. It's the next step. That's not a devaluing of someone that is renting. It doesn't have to be an either or in that sense. It's a motivator or the next step, or because think about, if the more that I'm responsible for around my home, the more I have to grow into those responsibilities and actually be faced with who I am and what I want and how do I show up. And I'm held to account by the actual structure, by the actual obligation. Obligations create accountability feedback loops. The less things obligated to do, the less things I'm responsible for, the less people that I'm responsible for, the more entitled I am to run amok on my own self. So that's like a really long way to say, you know, how about the whole foundation of our culture is rooted in the opportunity to have property, to have the right to property. The right to property shelter is it's a signifier of individuality of the our individual sovereignty to think for ourselves, to develop into a self, to like our ability to say what we think, to think what we think, to act out what we think and say what we think. It's the foundation of the whole culture is the so how does a professional why is this profession meaningful based on the study of culture, society, and governance? It's a meaning creating machine. The process, the vision of the dream that people talk about is a pathway to independence. And human beings, we are driven by the pursuit of it's the pursuit of happiness is really the lowering of negative emotion and the increasing of positive emotion. And we lower negative emotion when we have a goal, and we increase positive emotion when we are instantiated in a community, in a family, in a culture that is like a walled garden. And that metaphor of the walled garden is perfectly represented in a home. Like that's your walls inside of there. You may even have a garden. You have your walls, it's protecting you, it's yours, and it's an extension of yourself, which has to do in your psychology, your family, your education, your community, your culture. So what contribution do those that facilitate and participate in housing provide to a culture? I think, you know, the the contribution that professionals provide to a culture, how the professionals look at the mortgage, for example, right? The in the absence of a mortgage, like if think about the we may not be getting into that home without that partnership with the lender because of how much capital it would take to actually get that opportunity for that gift to actually get in the home. What a great deal. You could put much less if it's a 500, that seems like aggressive. It's a $300,000 house and you can get in there for 20% down and 80% I'm just using this as an arbitrary, easy math. And, there are other costs associated than what is going down. There's the closing costs and there's other fees and there's expenses, but it it's less than 100%. And then those expenses, if you're partnering with the debt is that partnership with a lender that's going to benefit from actually lending that money while you benefit from moving into the actual home, which is going to have a positive psychological impact on your individuality. The professionals that are helping facilitate that are quite literally enabling the maturity, the maturation of the individual and their family. There are significant economic benefits based on the data that show that those that own homes, they ride that economic wave up over time. Yes, there's ups, yes, there's downs. If you look at, for example, on a negative, the look at the financial crisis. That's where, in a sense, the system wasn't operating in accountability, it was operating in entitlement. You get a house, you get a house, you get a house, you get a house. With it, without enough questions being asked, without enough no, everyone's getting a yes. That's that's decreasing personal responsibility, increasing entitlement, increasing risk. Who's responsible? Everyone ultimately is responsible because, and that's shown in how the system collapsed. And now the governing bodies are putting money back into the system to try to, get everything back to square one. But we're all losing because at the end of the day, the professionals, so what contribution to that, to those that facilitate and participate in housing provide to a culture? They provide responsibility, they provide stewardship, they provide knowledge, they provide information, they inform the consumer on what is in their best interest, or they don't. And if they do, if you're providing information that's in the consumer's best interest and you're a professional in the space, you can completely change their life on a psychological level and an economic level and a social level. New zip code, new schools, better schools than their past generation, more access to education. Now, it's just each generation is getting better because of the choices that have been made by the professional. It's an important role, and in the absence of it being with the spirit of the advisor and the spirit of the professional, it can negatively impact the entire culture's economy, the entire culture's value system, just like we've seen in the past, and lose if the United States of America loses its values and loses its economic, and then that has a negative economic impact on the world, then America loses its social standing in the world. And that's the role that professionals can play in the market. That's a contribution that those that facilitate and participate in housing provide to a culture, is they help steward the right. There's those first time home buyers. If a first time home buyer does that the right way, it could change their complete familial history. Just like the founder of EPM took a rowboat from Cuba in the nighttime with a few people, landed in Miami with nothing, and over their lifetime built a a building business and was able to support, bought a home, supported their offspring, the future founder of EPM, that today has built with their partners and their team members and over a 2 decade career, an organization that's doing billions and billions and billions in loans to help thousands and thousands and thousands of people change the trajectory of their family culture's history. All that can be done because one person decides to leave a culture that's not that stops working, in a sense, for the benefit of the individual, and goes to a culture that works for the benefit of the individual to have agency, invest in housing, build a business, provide education and opportunity for their offspring to then, get to that next level and build the American gift for others. Which rules would you advise our audience to pay attention to as it relates to housing being meaningful? Which rules would you advise our audience to pay attention to as it relates to the American gift and how housing is meaningful? I wrote down rule 4, 5, and 7 in beyond order. So if you haven't listened to that on the Culture Marriage podcast, rule 4, 5, and 7 on the Culture Matters podcast. I go deep dive on each rule in Beyond Order. Beyond Order is, to my knowledge, the third of Dr. Peterson's books, 12 More Rules for Life. It's taking the 12 rules for life and going beyond order, quite literally, because the 12 rules for life is an argument for order, um, antidote to suffering. It was like an antidote to suffering. It's like get more order, like figure out your base, and then okay, now what? It's like get your house in perfect order, and then go now, go to work. You know, leave the hut and go hunt. I wrote rule four, rule five, and rule seven down. Rule four is notice that opportunity lurks where responsibilities are abdicated, um, which ultimately is if this is the American gift, that plays to the concept of the American gift. If the American dream is a metaphor for everyone that isn't in America, but it's a gift because we all have it. We either seize it mentally and spiritually, um, or or we can potentially lose it. We're one generation away from losing the gift, losing the opportunity to grow our lives through the governing system that we have in this, whether we realize that or not. So notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. One of the things about capitalism is that not everyone has to go and pursue it. That people can do as they please, and there'll be consequences. One that has one may not be as two parties, both ethical. One works twice the hours and has more knowledge and puts more effort. They'll likely get farther with that open system than someone who works half the hours, has less knowledge. It's meritocratic in that way. It's a quality of opportunity. There's an equality of opportunity, but you have to seize the opportunity mentally. You have to seize the opportunity spiritually. You have to seize it. So notice that you want to notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. So maybe it's harder. Maybe the economy is down versus 20 years ago. I'm just making this up. So someone today that's 22 could say, education is more expensive. My student loans are higher. There's less jobs. I'm going to bow out and just try to tear the whole system down. I'm going to go, denigrate social institutions and creative achievements. I'm going to adopt an ideology. I'm not going to work as hard as I possibly can. I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to tear it down. The challenge here is that no, you should go all in, go try. So an example with the mortgage business right now, if the rates are higher, so it's more expensive to get a loan, and there's still less housing availability. So there's less housing availability. So there's less supply. So demand goes up. That increases pricing. And then it's also more expensive to get the loan. The loans are more expensive. That would shrink the buyer pool in theory if you're just using like common sense. So if if there however many more mortgage professionals were in the business when there was more buying opportunity, more supply, and it was less expensive, that pool is going to shrink. So a lot of people are going to leave the business because there just literally is not enough business. However, as an individual, that's like a statistical overview. Each of us, as agents of free will, we don't have to choose to leave. We can choose to notice that opportunity lurks or responsibility has been abdicated. And we could follow rule seven, work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. And we can seize that opportunity. We can make it happen. We can actually create success. And this is what happens when times get tougher in an industry because there's less opportunity mathematically and the costs go up. People that don't have the fortitude, they don't have the aim, they don't have the vision, they don't have the plan, they may not even have the reserves or access to capital. They're unwilling to take on risk. Maybe they're burnt out because they were effing around when times were good and they weren't saving. They weren't reinvesting. They were just riding the wave. You'll see them leave, and that creates opportunity for the person that stays, that builds their success. They just won't get it right now. They'll get it later. And an example of this would be one of the many examples on the Culture Matters podcast would be I remember interviewing Shant Banosian, who's now the president, I believe the president of GR, is a massive mortgage company. And he had said that in before 2008 in the space He was investing, he was learning a lot, he was saving money. And so when things went down, he was ready. He was prepared mentally, spiritually, and from a financial standpoint, because he that's how he was raised. That's the influences that were in his life. That's his personality. You know, I would go listen to that episode on the Culture Matters podcast. Sean Benojian, it's a great episode. But that's an example of that. I also wrote down rule 1, 4, 7, and 9 in 12 Rules for Life. Remember, the question was, which rules would you advise our audience to pay attention to as it relates to the American gift and why it's meaningful? Rule 1, 4, 7, and 9 in 12 Rules for Life. Rule 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back. So you have to do that when things are getting tougher because it's an opportunity to serve somebody who otherwise won't be served because many people are unsure of what to do next. They're kind of they're stagnant, they're in fight or flight, their aim is unclear because expenses have gone up, revenue's gone down. Even the most powerful person, it's like David versus Goliath. Goliath is not ready. They've got their armor weighs them down. Their staffing, their operating costs. Without courage, and they could be like Osiris. They've stopped paying attention in that rule 4. Osiris stops paying attention. He loses his vision, and he doesn't even see his brothers right there who has, who kills him. And that represents how the uh, those in positions of authority and power have to be responsible, proportionate to those positions, or they will lose. They will not be able to protect the culture, and chaos will come back. Chaos will return and take them out. So rule 4 is stand up, or rule 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back. I think Peterson would advise those in the industry to stand up straight with your shoulders back and seize the opportunity when things get harder. The cost of capital is higher. There's less opportunity perceivably, but there's always opportunity, or else the whole freaking system would collapse. There's always going to be opportunity, and that's where the real wealth is made. So, number 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else's today. It's not the time to have envy or let resentment build like what you should have done or what your employer should have done. It's or your partners should have done. It's not the time to self-deceive and to play the victim and be arrogant about it, but it's the time to be humble, to be a servant, to work more hours, make less in the short term, and you'll make much more in the long term and you'll receive much. Dr. Peterson is a perfect person to talk on this because he he worked for decades on his thesis that now I'm some, random guy on YouTube that or a podcast that read the textbook. I have it right here. I read the textbook a bunch of times and it's like, wow, what an amazing textbook, psychology textbook. As a culture advisor, somebody interested in culture, like discovering his work is such a huge helpful impact. Um, no one bought that book. I don't even know if people even buy it now. Who knows who's even reading it? I'm sure a cadre of people, but um, it doesn't have to be at that a million people that buy it and 10,000 people that read it. It could be 1,000 people buy it and 10 read it, but it's the 10 that tell the truth that matters. And so, shout out to How to Plan Your Life in Peterson Academy. So you compare yourself to where you were yesterday, not to someone else's today. It's that self-awareness and that I guess self-esteem coming from, all right, so gratitude. I learned this in Rule 12. Be grateful in spite of your suffering. Having gratitude's a consequence of comparing yourself to where you were yesterday, not to someone else's today. Like, oh, look how far I've come. What's possible. I'm more open than, oh, look at that person. I want what they need. Maybe that's distracting me. I don't know their story. I'm projecting, I'm giving them more credit than they've earned, and I'm subduing my potential, my focus, and that can deviate me off the plan. It's where are we going? Or what's the opportunity? What do I know that's a value? What plan can I make, and how do I keep the plan? How do I stay in tune with the plan? And so to do that, I'm going to compare myself to who I was yesterday, not to someone else is today. And number seven, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So that's like that I could look at in the context of home ownership and actually working with customers and helping them buy homes at the best economic circumstance while taking into all factors of their life. As an advisor, you want to pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So, like in sales, if you want a lifetime customer, you help them solve their problem, even the problems that they don't even see that they have or they could have. That's where questions come in. That's where knowledge comes in. That's where honesty comes in, courage and faith, vision. What's meaningful is to do 10 transactions with somebody over their lifetime, or four with them and three with one kid and three with a friend of theirs, or one with three different friends of theirs, then just do one transaction that wasn't in the ideal for them, but you made the most money in the short term. It doesn't make sense. No one wants to play with someone that cheats. I've learned that Peterson talks about that often, right? We're cooperating in our customer to salesperson relationship. If we're competing, it's going to be a transactional, short-term oriented. You might get that dopamine, that bump, but you're going to have to take advantage of a lot of people to maintain that career over a long time. And the likelihood is you're not going to actually be able to do it because of the amount of anxiety that you're going to be living with. You're just going to end up doing all sorts of things to miss the mark. That's where people end up partying. They distract themselves with things that they don't have to face their conscience of what they did at work. And I see it. I see it as a business advisor and a culture consultant and advisor. People that are not building their business ethically come up with creative ways below their awareness to just spend all their money and lose all their wealth and never build anything. So you want to pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And that's going to come from long-term relationships that are rooted in honesty, knowledge, competency, and that goes to the rule nine, which is assume that the person you are listening to knows something that you don't. One of the diminishing returns of being an expert and doing something for a long, long, long time is that people who you need to listen to the most and do discovery, the more successful you are, the more known you are to be successful, the less you'll, unless you intervene, the more questions they'll ask you versus talk at you or share. Like there's a they're asking you the questions for you to get the information, and it's important to and there's value in being able to share information. But like anything generalized, it's riddled in contradiction. So the advisor's advisor, or the spirit of the advisor, the spirit of the professional is lit is it's acted out in inquiry. So it takes humility for the professional to that is getting asked a million questions by their um, counterpart to answer the questions while asking questions to discover more and more information so that one's answers are more nuanced to the individual versus generalized to the group. And so assume that the person you are listening to knows something you don't is when the expert assumes that they know less than their counterpart who's not an expert. That's that Socratic humility, I would call it. At the base of the scientific method. It's more of I think Dr. Peterson would argue it's more of a faith rooted, there's a moral component to that. There's a faith component to that. Question four, I've only asked three of the 14 questions. This is going to be multiple parts, but I already feel more prepared and it's enjoyable to think through these things. What happens when the professionals in this room stop caring about what they do and wanting to and and working, sorry. What happens when the professionals in this room stop caring about what they do and working towards the benefit of their customers? Well, the game is going to stop. As I said earlier, we don't want to play a game. Little kids will not play a game with someone that's cheating. And so when we as what is customer service? The second word is service. What's at the root of service? Sacrifice. What's at the root of sacrifice? What does that imply? I'm going to give up my short-term gain for with the faith that I'll get a long-term benefit. And doing that, that helps my counterpart get a short-term gain. The short-term gain, like, right? I'm serving the customer. They buy the product, they get it. It's not they buy the product, they hope to get it. The product's got to work. The product has to have quality that's greater than the economic expense or the service. The outcome they get from investing the capital, investing the time, and the energy of making the decision, the outcome is greater in than what was invested. And once their investment is spent, it's gone. So that they want to get a return, and how quickly they get a return matters. That's where sense of urgency. People that consider themselves service servants to their customers, they sacrifice. They have sense of urgency, and I think there's a very important component there with the time piece. It's like any of us could die at any moment. And so your last act of service in this world could literally just be returning a phone call to a customer. You gave your time. It's the most valuable thing. It's your word. It's your potential to create. And that's a core values interaction. What happens when the professionals in this room stop caring about what they do and working towards the benefit of their customers is they're not they're what they could say that they care, they could think that they care. If the action doesn't match, then there's it's a values less culture, and values less, the lack of values leads eventually to a lack of value. The economic The economics follow the cultural. The cultural is a consequence of the individual. The individual that sacrifices, that has that sense of urgency, that has that intention, that's paying attention to the customer and has an intention to serve them and to help them, is going to create value. One plus one equals three. The individual that has more of an interest, an inclination, they're paying attention to themselves, and their intention is to help themselves. It's one, it's negative 10. Negative one plus one is zero. That's how I would put it. Negative one plus one is zero. And so eventually that's going to be nothing. Or negative one plus nine is eight, not nine. So the person that the customer brought something of value, but they're leaving with less. They still have enough. They don't recognize that they have less. We're not building, it's not, but one plus one is three in the sense that when two people come together, they're both bringing values. They both have an intention to help one. They're both paying attention to one another, and their intention is to help one another. In free exchange, more energy ends up being created. It flows back versus just falling off to one party. It ends up coming back. And I think the world is constantly in flux, and there is in self-centeredness in the world. There is uh, people paying attention only to themselves or primarily to themselves with their intention to take. Because there are takers, because there is energy leaving the system, those that are attempting to bring energy into the system are creating more energy for those that are bringing into the system. It's constantly moving, constantly flowing. It's going to flow towards those that are giving. It's not like the takers can't take and have for a while, but the givers that give and can steward, they're going to keep the wealth, right? It's the Warren Buffett versus the Belfort. They're both really smart, different core values, different aims, attention at different places, different intention, different level of sacrifice, different customer orientation, different consequence over the short in the long term. How can, last question for this part one of four, it looks like, how can infighting within an industry disrupt the function or utility of its purpose, if at all, and what recommendations do you have for rectifying this occurrence? How can infighting within an industry disrupt the function? Well, think about it. If an industry is fighting with itself, then its attention is on itself and not its customers, implicit, whether it realizes it or not. And go to the quote: if the structure of culture is disrupted unwittingly, chaos returns. That's that Descensus ad inferos, the preface of Maps of Meaning. Something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing we cannot see is culture. So culture protects us. The thing we do not understand, the thing we cannot see is culture and its intrapsychic or internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. So we don't understand the chaos. If the structure of culture is disrupted, chaos returns. When an industry fights itself, it disrupts the culture. Chaos returns. People can't see up, people can't see down. It starts to undermine the values of the industry, the core values, meaning people's words and thoughts and their actions become more and more out of alignment. And that's a compromise of integrity. And integrity, as Buffett would say, I want somebody with integrity, intelligence, enthusiasm. If you have somebody with high integrity, I'm sorry, low integrity and high intelligence and high enthusiasm, they'll kill you. So you could be a smart industry with a lot of work, but you're just going to get yourself rich and infatuated on that, and at the cost of others, the other as in the consumer. So when an industry becomes tribal in that sense, it's now competing internally versus, like, because there's a cooperative element to the competition. There's got to be a cooperative, respectful, professional element to an industry for competition to happen in a way that makes where it adds value in free enterprise to customers. Anybody, start your business, you get educated. If you don't innovate products or services, the customer has leverage because they get to choose who they work with, who they don't. When it becomes tribal, name calling, character assassinations, people aren't willing to be in the same room and learn and be influenced in best practices. There's a overemphasis on an enemy outside that feeds on the lowest forms of human nature, the resentment, the deceit, the arrogance, and it takes people's individuality away. It undermines their sovereignty. It ultimately undermines people's ability to think, speak, and speaking and thinking have a relationship. And that undermines the relationship between advisor, customer, or professional customer. Because the professional has to be able to show up and work with people of all walks of life, have empathy, use compassion rationally, be responsible, tell the truth, think clearly. Tribalism and infighting undermines the ability to think, the ability to speak, and it's like a downward spiral. It lowers empathy and makes things more in a vacuum. Monkey see, monkey do. Below awareness, people just start modeling that behavior. And now professionals aren't working with certain people because of what they believe, as an example. And now consumers are another thing is consumers are having less option because people are part of ideologies than they are a part of the general culture. People are less likely to put in the work to actually for the benefit of having the best quality at the lowest price. It becomes the highest price at the lowest quality real fast. And that's where governing bodies end up having to come in. And so the less responsible are, the less agency we are, the less thoughtful and reasonable we are in an industry, the more regulations will end up coming in to make sure the consumers are protected. At the end of the day, we're all consumers, and we need empathy And for empathy to happen, we need self-awareness. And when an industry becomes infighting, becomes prevalent or susceptible to infighting, and that us versus them mentality, it lowers self-awareness and it lowers empathy and increases resentment. It increases contempt and it destroys the values of the industry and therefore the value to the consumer eventually. These are reasons why the American gift is meaningful, what the American gift is, and these are my questions to Dr. Peterson in part one, and some of the answers that I think he would give, of course, in his own way. Um, like Rule 10 and 12 rules, be precise in your speech. Maybe, yeah, definitely more precise. I would give that. And but nonetheless, I'm preparing for this conversation between Dr. Jordan B. Peterson and yours truly at the American Gift Conference 2025 with some of the best people in the mortgage industry, account executives, brokers, and IMBs, and so many more vendors and other constituents that aren't just vendors, but are professionals that add value every single day to homeowners throughout the United States. Share this with a friend. Please leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. Go listen to Beyond Order series on the Culture Matters podcast, episodes 1 through 14, and we will see you on part 2 of this series.